He told a black woman to get out of first class, then found out she was the one who signs his paycheck. He didn't mean for it to turn into a scene, at least that's what he'd tell himself later. When Nathan Cole boarded that flight from Los Angeles to Newark, he was already irritated. The flight was delayed, the airport was loud, and he'd been juggling 3 phone calls in a row about a project that wasn't even his responsibility. He had his laptop bag slung over one shoulder and a black coffee in his hand, burning hot and already spilling over the lid. He just wanted to sit down, close his eyes, and pretend the day hadn't started. First class, row 2, seat A. He'd paid for that upgrade himself, his little reward for surviving another quarter at the company, but when he reached his seat, someone was already there. A woman, mid-30s maybe, black, wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, and headphones tucked under a soft afro puff. She was scrolling through her phone, calm, collected, completely unconcerned. Nathan hesitated. He double-checked the boarding pass in his hand. Excuse me, he said, leaning slightly toward her. I think you might be in my seat. She looked up, smiled politely, and replied, I don't think so. Nathan blinked. I'm pretty sure this is 2A. She held up her ticket without a word, and there it was, seat 2A. First class, confirmed. But instead of walking away, Nathan's mouth got ahead of his brain. Are you sure that's not a mistake? He asked. Her smile didn't move. Pretty sure. The flight attendant nearby caught the tension immediately. Is everything okay here? She asked, approaching with the kind of tired kindness you only get from working too many early morning flights. Nathan turned to her, lowering his voice just a little. I think there's been some confusion. I believe she might have been seated here by accident. The woman set her phone down slowly. By accident, she repeated, still polite, but now with a trace of steel in her voice. You think I don't belong here? Nathan felt the heat climb up his neck. No, that's not what I said. I'm just saying, maybe there was a mix-up. Sometimes people, get switched around. The flight attendant looked between them, trying to stay neutral. Sir, let me just check your boarding pass. Nathan handed it over, confident he was right. But when she looked at it, then glanced at the seat number, her face softened into that look you get when someone's about to learn they were wrong. Sir, she said carefully, you're in 2B. That's the aisle seat. She's in 2A silence. Nathan blinked. Once, twice. Oh, he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. Right. My mistake. He stepped back, sliding into the aisle seat like it didn't burn his pride. He could feel people watching from across the cabin, even if they pretended not to. That familiar secondhand tension you feel when someone gets caught saying something they shouldn't. The woman turned her head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. Don't worry, she said softly. It happens all the time. She went back to scrolling through her phone, and that, somehow, stung worse than anything else she could have said. Nathan didn't reply. He just adjusted his seatbelt, stared straight ahead, and prayed for takeoff to come fast. But the thing about awkward moments is, they don't end when you sit down. They follow you. And for Nathan, this one was just getting started. The engines rumbled beneath them as the plane taxied toward the runway, but the real tension was right there in row 2. Nathan sat stiff in his seat, eyes locked on the in-flight magazine he wasn't reading. Every few seconds, he'd glance at the woman beside him, quiet, composed, and apparently unbothered. She'd switched her phone to airplane mode and was now reading something on her tablet. Her posture was easy, confident. The kind of calm that doesn't come from being lucky. It comes from being used to being tested. Nathan wanted to say something, anything to smooth things over, but the words got stuck behind his pride. He cleared his throat. Didn't mean to cause a scene back there, he muttered. The woman didn't look up. You didn't cause a scene, she said. You made an assumption. Her tone wasn't rude, it was factual, like she was reciting the weather. Nathan shifted in his seat. I just thought there was a mistake. It happens. She finally turned to him. You thought I made a mistake, she corrected. Not that the system did. Not that maybe you did. Her words landed like a quiet slap. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. She'd nailed it. A few rows back, a businessman coughed. Somewhere up front, the flight attendant asked everyone to buckle up. Nathan felt like the whole cabin had shrunk down to just the two of them. "I didn't mean it that way," he said after a moment. "I know," she replied, eyes on the tablet again, "but it still meant something." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She gave a small laugh, short, dry, not cruel but close. "It means intent doesn't erase impact." That phrase hung in the air. Intent doesn't erase impact. He'd heard it before, maybe at one of those corporate diversity seminars he'd half listened to while checking his email. But hearing it now, on this plane, from the woman he'd misjudged, hit different. He turned toward the window, pretending to watch the plane line up for takeoff. The reflection of her face flickered faintly in the glass. She looked tired, but not in the way people get from lack of sleep. It was a deeper kind of tired, the kind that comes from being questioned one too many times. The captain's voice crackled through the speaker, cheerful and detached. "Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff." Nathan leaned back, fastening his seatbelt tighter than necessary. "Look," he said finally, "if I offended you, I apologize." "Really?" She exhaled softly. "Apology accepted." He waited for more, but that was it. 2 words. Done. She went right back to her reading. He wanted her forgiveness to feel like closure, but instead it felt like a mirror. The kind you don't want to look into because it shows more of you than you're ready to see. Minutes later, as the plane lifted off, Nathan tried to close his eyes and forget. But her words wouldn't leave him alone. Intent doesn't erase impact. But it's funny how the universe has a way of circling back, especially when you think you've already learned your lesson. The plane leveled off above the clouds, and the seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft click. That's when the real silence began. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your ears and makes every little movement sound louder. Nathan stared straight ahead, pretending to watch the in-flight movie playing on the small screen in front of him. He wasn't following a single scene. Every sound felt magnified. The scratch of her pen on a notebook, the zip of someone's carry-on behind them, the clink of ice in plastic cups as the flight attendant rolled the drink cart down the aisle. He caught himself glancing her way again. She was working now, jotting quick notes between swipes on her tablet. No jewelry, no designer handbag, nothing flashy. Just focus. She looked like someone used to being in control. Nathan leaned back in his seat, trying to focus on anything else. He pulled out his laptop, opened a spreadsheet, and stared at the numbers. He'd been preparing for a major presentation next week, something that could finally get him noticed by upper management. The idea of promotion, the bonus, the recognition, it was all he'd been thinking about for months. He'd been telling himself he was doing everything right, working late, hitting deadlines, playing politics just enough to stay visible. But the look that woman gave him earlier, it had cut through all that, made him question what kind of person he was outside the boardroom. "Chicken or pasta?" the flight attendant asked. Nathan blinked. Chicken." "Thanks," the woman beside him answered without looking up. "Just water, please." They ate in silence. He kept his eyes on his food, but every so often, he'd feel that same pinch of guilt in his chest. It wasn't just that he'd been wrong, it was that she'd handled it better than he had. A few hours in, he noticed her pull out a file folder with the company logo on it, his company's logo. He frowned. Maybe she worked there too? The thought made his stomach tighten. He almost asked about it, but he'd already said enough for one flight. So he just watched her flip through pages, highlighting sections, scribbling notes. Every move she made was calm, precise, deliberate. She glanced over once, caught his eyes, and said, "You work there too?" He hesitated. "Yeah, been there about 6 years. What about you?" She smiled, but there was something knowing behind it. "Let's just say I'll be spending a lot more time there soon." He laughed awkwardly. "You in management?" "Something like that," she said, turning back to her work. Nathan nodded, still uneasy. He didn't push further, but curiosity kept buzzing in his head. Maybe she was consulting. Maybe she worked for one of the partner firms. Either way, she clearly knew her stuff. He closed his laptop and rested his head against the seat. But sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept circling back to that moment when he'd told her she didn't belong there. Now, looking at her working in silence, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe he was the one sitting in the wrong seat. But Nathan had no idea that the real surprise was waiting for him on the ground, one that would make this flight feel like a warm-up. By the time the plane touched down in Newark, Nathan was restless and ready to get off. He'd spent 5 hours stuck between regret and denial, convincing himself the whole thing wasn't that serious. People made mistakes. That's all it was. But when the seatbelt sign went off and everyone stood to grab their bags, he caught a glimpse of her again, moving with that same quiet confidence. No rush, no fluster, just steady. She smiled at the flight attendant on her way out, thanked her, and disappeared into the first-class jet bridge crowd. Nathan waited until the aisle cleared before stepping out. His shoulders ached, his shirt was wrinkled, and his ego felt bruised in places no one could see. The terminal was chaos, rolling suitcases, chatter, and the smell of coffee from a nearby kiosk. Nathan pulled out his phone to check emails as he walked, almost running into a guy dragging 2 kids in a stroller. He muttered a quick sorry and kept going. An email from corporate communications popped up in his inbox. Subject: welcome our new CEO this week. Mandatory staff meeting Monday at 10 a.m. Nathan skimmed it without much thought. New CEO, great. Probably another high-level executive from one of the partner firms. The message mentioned a strong background in leadership, tech innovation, and organizational ethics. That last part made him sigh. Another culture reset. They did those every couple of years. Talk about diversity, inclusivity, and leadership accountability, and then everyone went back to doing the same thing. He tossed his phone into his jacket pocket and headed for baggage claim. The air outside the airport was cold and sharp, cutting through his thin shirt as he waited for his rideshare. His thoughts wandered to the meeting ahead, to his upcoming presentation, to the face of the woman he'd just spent 5 uncomfortable hours sitting next to. There was something about her tone, measured, unbothered, certain, that still echoed in his head. He tried to brush it off. "It's fine," he muttered to himself. "It's over." The car pulled up, a silver sedan with worn seats and the smell of pine air freshener. The driver gave a polite nod, and Nathan slid in. The city passed by in flashes. Billboards, warehouses, construction sites, bridges streaked with morning light. Nathan's eyes drifted shut for a few minutes, but when the driver spoke, he jolted awake. "Rough flight?" the driver asked. "You could say that," Nathan replied, rubbing his temples. "Work trip?" "Yeah," Nathan said, forcing a half smile. "Work never really stops." He didn't realize how true that would be. When the car finally pulled up to his apartment building, Nathan was exhausted. He dropped his bag by the couch, loosened his tie, and poured himself a glass of water. Then, sitting at his kitchen counter, he opened his laptop again. The company portal was filled with news about the incoming CEO, someone described as visionary, forward-thinking, a champion for fairness and integrity. But oddly enough, there wasn't a photo attached yet. Nathan leaned back in his chair. "Whoever she is," he muttered, "she's walking into a circus." He had no clue that the ringmaster was already someone he'd met and underestimated. But come Monday morning, every assumption he had about his world and his place in it was about to change. Monday morning came too fast. Nathan barely slept, his mind juggling presentation slides, deadlines, and that awkward encounter on the plane he was trying so hard to forget. He got up early, pressed his best suit, and drove downtown to the company headquarters in Jersey City. The building's mirrored windows caught the morning sun, reflecting streaks of orange and gold across the parking lot. It looked like a place built for people who believed they were important. Inside, the lobby buzzed with that nervous excitement that comes whenever leadership changes hands. Employees huddled around the coffee machines, whispering theories. Some said the new CEO came from Silicon Valley. Others swore she used to run a billion-dollar startup. Nobody knew her name yet, but everyone was curious. Nathan walked toward the elevator with his coworker Brian, a cheerful guy from accounting who never stopped talking. "You hear who the new boss is?" Brian asked, sipping from his coffee cup. "Nope. Corporate's keeping it quiet," Nathan replied, pressing the elevator button. Brian grinned. "Rumor is she's tough. Real, no-nonsense type. The kind who can smell excuses from across the room." Nathan chuckled. "Great. Just what we need." When they stepped into the conference hall, the air was thick with anticipation. Dozens of employees filled the rows, all facing the stage where a large projector screen displayed the company's logo and the words, "Welcome, our new CEO." Nathan took a seat near the front, smoothing his tie. He glanced at his notes for the presentation he'd be giving later that week. He needed this to go perfectly. A good impression could put him in line for that director position he'd been chasing. A communications manager took the stage. "Good morning, everyone," she said brightly. "Thank you for joining us. Today, we officially welcome the next chapter of leadership for our company. Please give a warm round of applause for our new Chief Executive Officer." Nathan leaned forward. "Miss Danielle Rhodes." The applause started, but Nathan didn't move. His heart stopped mid-beat. That name. Then she walked out, calm, graceful, dressed in a dark navy suit that said confidence without needing to shout it. The same woman from the plane. The same woman he'd told didn't belong in first class. Nathan's hands went cold, his jaw clenched before he even realized it. He tried to keep his face neutral, but his mind was spinning. She smiled as the room applauded, scanning the audience before speaking into the microphone. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's good to finally meet the people behind the work I've been reading about." Nathan sat frozen. She had the same calm composure, that same tone that had cut through him on the plane. But now, it carried authority. Danielle continued, talking about growth, innovation, and change. But every so often, her eyes flicked across the crowd, and once they landed on him. Just for a second. Long enough for him to know she remembered. Brian leaned toward him and whispered, "Man, she's impressive, huh?" Nathan swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You could say that." As she wrapped up her speech, she said something that hit Nathan straight in the gut. "Respect isn't just about who's sitting in the big chair," she said. "It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching." Applause filled the room again, but Nathan couldn't hear any of it. That line was meant for everyone, but it felt like a spotlight aimed directly at him. He tried to keep his head down, but when she stepped off the stage, she glanced his way again, this time with a small, almost knowing smile. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because a few hours later, an email would land in Nathan's inbox that would make his stomach drop even further. Nathan spent the next few hours trying to keep his head down. Every conversation around the office was about her. Danielle Rhodes, the new CEO who'd somehow managed to make a corporate meeting feel like a wake-up call. He told himself she probably didn't remember him. She must meet hundreds of people every week. But deep down, he knew better. The way she'd looked at him from the stage, calm, direct, almost deliberate, had burned through every excuse he'd been building since that flight. By lunchtime, he was buried in spreadsheets, trying to focus, when his email pinged. Subject, meeting request, 2 p.m. From Danielle Rhodes, CEO office. Nathan's throat went dry. He opened it, half expecting it to be some automated welcome session. But no. It was personal. "Nathan, please stop by my office at 2 o'clock. I'd like to discuss your upcoming project presentation. DR." He read it twice, then a third time, hoping he was imagining things. But no. It was real. Brian passed by his desk, slapping him on the shoulder. "Hey man, you got pulled into the big leagues already?" "That's fast." "Yeah," Nathan said quietly. "Something like that." The next hour crawled by. He tried to look composed, typing aimlessly, clicking between tabs, but his pulse was hammering. At 1:59, he stood outside her glass office door, smoothing his tie one last time before knocking. "Come in," her voice called. He stepped inside. Her office was sleek, but not showy. Large windows overlooking the city, a few plants by the corner, a framed quote on the wall that read, "Power is how you use your influence, not how loud you speak." She was sitting behind her desk, reading a document. When she looked up, her eyes met his, and for a moment, it felt like that flight all over again. "Mr. Cole," she said, standing and offering a handshake. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," he replied, his voice a little too quick. "Congratulations on the new role." "Thank you," she said with a faint smile. "Please have a seat." He sat across from her, the air thick with unspoken history. "I've reviewed your project proposal," she began, tapping a folder on her desk. "Impressive numbers, strong strategy." Nathan nodded, trying to keep his breathing steady. "Thank you. I've been leading that initiative for the last few months." She smiled again, that same composed, knowing smile she had on the plane. "I remember. You mentioned something about your company while we were flying." His stomach tightened. "Right. I didn't realize, well, I didn't know that I'd end up sitting in this chair," she finished for him. He exhaled. Something like that. She leaned back slightly. I figured as much. You seemed surprised. He looked down at his hands. Yeah, I owe you another apology for that day. What I said, how I acted, it was wrong. I made assumptions. Danielle studied him for a moment, her tone softening. And what did that moment teach you? He hesitated. That people can belong anywhere. That sometimes your bias shows up before your manners do. Her expression shifted, part approval, part reflection. That's a start, she said. I'm not looking to humiliate you, Nathan. I just wanted to see if you'd acknowledge it. Too many people double down instead of looking inward. He nodded slowly. I appreciate that. Honestly, Danielle leaned forward, folding her hands. Look, I didn't call you in here to talk about the flight. I called you in because your proposal has potential, but potential only goes so far if the person leading it doesn't see value in everyone around them. I understand, he said quietly. I believe you do, she replied. I'm giving you a chance to lead this project, but I'm also expecting you to build a team that reflects more than just people who look or think like you. Can you do that? Yes, absolutely. Good, she said, standing and offering her hand again. Then we'll start fresh. He shook her hand, firm but respectful this time. As he turned to leave, she added, And Nathan? He paused. First class isn't about where you sit, she said. It's about how you treat people when you think they don't matter. He gave a small nod, the weight of her words sinking in. I won't forget that. But lessons like that don't fade overnight. And as Nathan stepped out of her office, he realized this moment would follow him for the rest of his career. That night, Nathan didn't go straight home. He parked his car by the waterfront instead, staring out at the gray ripples of the Hudson River under a fading sky. He kept replaying her words in his mind. First class isn't about where you sit. He'd heard hundreds of leadership quotes before, read every business book his mentors recommended, but none of that ever hit him the way this did. Maybe because it wasn't said from a stage or written on a motivational poster. It came from someone who'd lived it, and who'd seen through him without even raising her voice. His phone buzzed with messages from coworkers gossiping about the new CEO. She's tough, huh? Man, she's not playing around. I heard she's shaking up the management team already. Nathan didn't reply. He just stared at the screen, feeling something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about bonuses or promotions. He was thinking about who he'd become in pursuit of them. The next morning, he walked into the office earlier than usual. The place was quiet, just the hum of computers booting up and the faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. He stopped by Angela's desk, a junior analyst who'd joined the team last month. She looked up, surprised. Morning, Mr. Cole. Call me Nathan, he said. Listen, I reviewed the data sheets you sent me last week. They were solid work, really sharp stuff. Angela blinked, caught off guard. Thank you, I wasn't sure if they were what you needed. They were, he said. In fact, I want you to present a section of them during Friday's meeting. You deserve credit for it. Her eyes widened. Seriously? I've never presented before. You'll do fine, he said, smiling. I've got your back. She smiled nervously, but nodded, clearly excited. For the rest of the week, Nathan found himself changing small things. Things he used to overlook. He started asking for input instead of giving orders. He noticed whose voices got drowned out during meetings. He made room for them. By Friday, the office felt different. When the presentation began, Danielle sat at the end of the conference table, her attention sharp but calm. Nathan stood at the front, walking through projections and graphs. Then he paused halfway through. I'd like to hand this next part to Angela, he said. She's been doing a lot of the groundwork behind these numbers. Angela froze for a split second, then gathered herself and began speaking. Her voice trembled at first, but soon steadied. Danielle watched closely, her expression unreadable but approving. When it ended, the room applauded lightly. Danielle nodded once and said, Good work, both of you. Nathan exhaled slowly. For once, he wasn't thinking about whether she'd forgotten the flight. He was thinking about whether he'd finally earned her respect. After the meeting, Danielle walked over to him. You surprised me today, she said. Hopefully in a good way, he replied. In a very good way, she said with a smile. Growth looks good on you, Nathan. He smiled back, genuinely this time. Guess I had a good teacher. She laughed softly. We all learn from each other. The key is staying humble enough to keep learning. Nathan nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. But change doesn't end in one meeting. And as Nathan left the room, he realized this wasn't about redemption. It was about responsibility. And he wasn't done yet. A few weeks passed, and life at the office began to settle into a new rhythm. The company felt different, sharper, more alive. People talked openly, shared ideas that used to get buried, and actually listened to one another. Danielle's leadership wasn't loud or showy. It was steady. The kind that didn't demand respect, but naturally earned it. Nathan noticed how quickly she'd become the quiet center of gravity in every room she walked into. Meetings ran smoother, tension eased. Even the skeptics, the ones who used to whisper about corporate diversity hires, stopped talking and started working. And Nathan, he'd changed too. Not overnight, but piece by piece. He still worked hard, still chased results, but something in his approach was different. He started checking his blind spots, not just in his projects, but in the way he treated people. He'd learned that leadership wasn't about the corner office or the title. It was about what you did when no one was clapping. One afternoon, as the day wound down, Danielle stopped by his desk. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Of course," he said, standing. They stepped into the hallway, sunlight spilling across the glass walls. "I just wanted to tell you," she said, "I've been noticing the changes you've made. The way you're managing your team. That's real growth, Nathan." He smiled modestly. "I had to face some things about myself. That flight, it opened my eyes." She tilted her head slightly. "Funny how life teaches us in unexpected places." "Yeah," he said with a half laugh. "You never know when your next lesson's boarding group 1. That made her laugh too, the genuine kind that softened the edge between them. "I appreciate the humility," she said. "It's rare. Keep it up, you'll go far." He nodded. "Thank you, Miss Rhodes." She gave a small smile. "Danielle's fine." As she walked away, Nathan leaned against the railing and let out a long breath. The world outside the window kept moving, taxis honking, people rushing home, city lights starting to blink on. And for the first time in a long time, Nathan didn't feel like he had to prove anything. He just wanted to do better, to be better. He thought back to that flight, the looks, the tension, the way his pride had made him smaller than he realized. He wasn't proud of it, but he was grateful for it. Because sometimes, the only way to see your reflection clearly is when someone else holds up the mirror. He opened his laptop, looked at the names of his team members, and smiled. Each one represented a story, a chance, a person he might have once overlooked. Not anymore. That night, as he left the office, he passed the framed company mission statement by the elevator. It used to feel like just words, but now one line stood out. "We lead with respect, not assumptions." He stopped and whispered to himself, "Yeah, that's first class." Then he stepped into the elevator, feeling lighter than he had in years. Don't let your assumptions speak louder than your empathy. Everyone you meet is fighting to be seen, heard, and respected. The moment you think someone doesn't belong, that's the moment you reveal how small your own world really is. Before you judge someone's place in the world, take a moment to check your own. Treat people with kindness, no matter where they sit, because tomorrow, they might just be the one signing your paycheck.